With the massive popularity of Sword Art Online back in 2012, it wasn't surprising when they announced the makings of a second season. With the anime being based off a series of light novels, there was still plenty of material that they could milk out of the show. With Sword Art Online 2 being hyped up with the announcement that the best arc in the entire novel series was to be adapted, even the harshest of critics of the first season couldn't help but be curious. The end result of all this is that while Sword Art Online 2 has plenty of good moments, the overall presentation of the show is flat and suffers from the repeated mistakes of the first season. What seems to have been a trend throughout the show overall is that it introduces a lot of interesting ideas, but often fails to find an effective way to execute them. On paper, the layout of the first half of the season was actually pretty interesting. We would be introduced into a new world that's completely different from what we've seen in the previous season. There would be a new female character that had some complexity to her, have a villain with seemingly supernatural powers, and our main character would be a fish out of water in this new world. It felt like the original creators understood what problems people had with the first season and wanted to improve on it. However, what we got out of the Phantom Bullet arc was less than stellar. This first arc, while fun and filled with plenty of action, seemed to return to what was presented in the first season. Our main character perfectly fits right into this world, furthering Kirito's association with being called a Mary Sue and having absolutely no flaws. This new game, Gun Gale Online, works a lot like a cross between RPGs and first-person shooters, completely different from the fantasy worlds we've already seen. It's obvious that the rules of this world are completely different from SAO or ALO, even with the whole virtual reality of it all. It would have been good to see Kirito struggle with the mechanics of this new game, but we see that early on that he doesn't need practice because he apparently is the best at everything. As well, our main antagonist of Phantom Bullet, Death Gun, adds very little to what's going on. Even with the ability to actually kill players, he quickly becomes a non-threat to our heroes, and leads to a reveal that was unnecessary. They do attempt to use Death Gun to give Kirito a sense of PTSD from what happened in the first season, but it just didn't work. Instead, it felt like a forced attempt to give Kirito more character that wasn't even there in the first place. The biggest disappointment, though, has to be Sinon, our new female protagonist in Gun Gale Online. When she was first introduced and we saw her backstory, there were so many places that they could have taken her. Yes, she's a meek person and she relied on the strength from the virtual world she's familiar with, but that could have led to a great story of triumphing over your inner demons. She felt like the first fleshed out character in this series and was someone who was interesting to watch. However, when Kirito enters her life, she becomes a textbook tsundere and is incapable of doing anything because she isn't our amazing lead shonen protagonist. It was kind of insulting to see this strong feminine character slowly be degraded into someone that would only be added to Kirito's harem. The Phantom Bullet arc took up half of the season to tell, and while a lot of the technical aspects of it were pretty great, the storytelling left a lot to be desired. While it had good pacing, the show just didn't know how to balance its characters, and was riddled with conveniences and deus ex machina. If Sword Art Online 2 had only been these 12 episodes, it wouldn't even be worth recommending, except to those who like the first series. The second half consists of 2 small arcs, both taking place in ALO, taking a step back from the whole die in the game, die in real life drama of this series, and decides to look deeper into the smaller stories of these characters. While the first mini-arc was more filler and was used to show off how great the animation is, it's the Mother's Rosario arc that really captures the meat of the series. This arc focuses more on Asuna, as she is asked to help out a small guild known as the Sleeping Knights. It was really nice to get an in-depth look at our lead female, who was rather railroaded at the end of last season, and didn't get much development in the first half of this season. The band of side characters that she meets are also very interesting, colorful, and feel a lot more fleshed out than our lead protagonists. After introducing these characters early on, I was more invested in them than I was in Kirito and his harem brigade and all of their life or death situations. I would much rather have followed the adventures of the Sleeping Knights and to see what it looked like to accomplish something through trial and error than to have a flawless Kirito win at everything. However, there's a rather big twist towards the end of this arc that can definitely leave a bad taste in people's mouths. It was something that was lightly foreshadowed throughout, but the impact that it gives just doesn't feel earned. Instead, it comes off as a shallow attempt to garner sympathy that I just can't fully get behind. Maybe if the plot points were more fleshed out a bit more, maybe it wouldn't have seemed like such a bad idea. But this is Sword Art Online we're talking about. That being said, they do use the twist for its advantage for the last few episodes of the series. This is a shining example of how a bad idea can turn into a good one with a little bit of effort put into it. However, this just reminds me of how sloppy Sword Art Online is with its overall storytelling. Maybe if the writing and main characters were better, I would be feeling this sense of completeness for the overall story instead of just this little bit. And that's all I can take away from Sword Art Online 2. While it definitely has a lot of great action and has a really strong ending, I can't help but notice the glaring flaws with the rest of the season. It's the fact that Kirito is still insanely overpowered. It fails miserably in an attempt to make a new strong female character out of Sinon, and there's just no sense of investment or urgency in these main characters. It seems a bit sad when I feel more invested in a filler arc than I am with the fact that our main characters could possibly die. It's a show that lacks focus or anything to say. Not every show has to say something profound, but Sword Art Online carries itself like it wants to say something important, but cares more about colorful fights and giant set pieces. However, I can't completely write off this season due to how well the Mother's Rosario arc was handled. Yes, that had its problems too, but it felt more focused, and had characters that were easy to root for long before the twist. I can easily say that it was the best arc of the entirety of the Sword Art Online anime series. If you are indeed a fan of the first season of Sword Art Online, I can definitely recommend Sword Art Online 2. It contains everything that fans love of the first season, but that also includes its problems. For people who are lukewarm to the first season, Season 2 is not a must-watch. But if you insist on checking it out, make sure to watch it all the way through. Trust me, the journey is bumpy as hell, but what's at the end is actually kinda sweet. Sword Art Online 2 gets a 6 out of 10.